Hey guys, tonight we slip behind the heavy velvet curtains of medieval royal chambers, where flickering candlelight dances off gilded tapestries, and the air is thick with the scent of jasmine. And let's be honest, probably something a little less fragrant too. You trudge quietly through the labyrinth of stone corridors, footsteps muffled by plush rugs worn smooth by centuries of slippered feet. Grand chamber doors creak open, revealing a bed draped with silks and laden with embroidered pillows, a private kingdom within a kingdom. But before the night's more intimate acts could unfold, medieval monarchs had their own peculiar bedtime rituals, some designed to soothe the mind, others to charm the body, and a few you probably won't survive the shock of hearing about. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to post your location and local time below. It's always fun to know who's joining me on these late night journeys. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sink into the plush cushions, your fingers tracing the intricate gold thread of a royal tapestry depicting hunting scenes. And already, the senses are being drawn into the quiet drama of medieval intimacy. It may surprise you to know that medieval kings and queens approached the most private moments of their day with a kind of theatrical solemnity, complete with scents, prayers, and even dietary rituals designed to prepare their bodies and spirits for the sacred act of lovemaking. The bedroom wasn't just a place for rest or pleasure. It was a carefully curated stage where royal authority, superstition, and the desire for heirs entwined in curious ways. First, the royal bath. Far from a casual soak, bathing was an elaborate ritual. Despite the modern myth that medieval people never bathed, royals often indulged in fragrant baths, scented with herbs and flowers, like rose petals, lavender, and sometimes more exotic ingredients like ambergris, a waxy substance from Wales that smells faintly sweet and musky. These baths were meant not only to cleanse, but also to soothe muscles and calm the nerves. The warm water was often infused with crushed herbs believed to stimulate desire or fertility. One such curious tidbit: some queens and noblewomen reportedly added crushed pearls or powdered unicorn horn to their baths, substances prized for their supposed magical properties. Historians still argue whether these substances were more about status signaling or actual belief in their powers. You can almost picture the queen reclining gracefully in a tub, delicate fingers trailing through shimmering waters, eyes half-lidded in anticipation or perhaps boredom. After the bath came a layer of preparation more spiritual than physical. Prayer and ritual were deeply intertwined with sexuality in the medieval royal mindset. Monarchs often said special prayers or recited particular psalms believed to sanctify the bedroom, ward off evil spirits, and invite blessings for fertility and love. Some rulers kept prayer books dedicated to their private moments, filled with carefully penned invocations. You might imagine a king, resplendent in velvet robes, kneeling beside his bed to murmur these sacred words, blending the sacred and the sensual in a way modern bedtime routines rarely replicate. The coexistence of religious devotion and sexual activity sometimes seems paradoxical, but in the medieval mind, it was all part of the same divine order. Beyond prayers, a fascinating and slightly odd practice involved what we might call sensory conditioning. Some nobles believed certain sounds, tastes, or even textures could heighten their romantic encounters. It wasn't uncommon for servants to play soft music, lyres, flutes, or gentle drums to set a calming or stimulating atmosphere. A lesser-known tidbit: some medieval royalty believed the smell of baked goods, like fresh bread or honeyed pastries, could encourage a joyful mood conducive to intimacy. You can almost smell the faint aroma of honey and cinnamon wafting through stone halls, mixing with the floral bath scents. Scholars debate whether these practices had actual physiological effects or were mostly symbolic acts reinforcing the power of ritual. Food also played a crucial role. It's tempting to imagine kings and queens gorging on rich feasts just before bed, but royal diets were surprisingly calculated. Some foods were believed to increase passion or virility. Figs, almonds, and oysters topped the list, while others, like lentils or heavy cheeses, were thought to dampen desire. This delicate balance between indulgence and restraint meant the royal table was an extension of the bedroom itself, another battleground where love and power intersected. You might picture a queen delicately nibbling on candied dates, savoring their sweetness not just for flavor, but for their reputed aphrodisiac qualities. Now, let's talk about an unexpectedly quirky bedtime habit: royal teeth cleaning. Yes, dental hygiene was taken seriously. Well, sort of. Some monarchs used mixtures of crushed herbs and salt as a kind of rudimentary toothpaste. The intriguing twist: certain recipes called for the inclusion of ashes or powdered charcoal, substances that would make you hesitate before applying them to your gums. The belief was that these harsh abrasives purified and protected the mouth, keeping it fresh for close encounters. Historians still argue whether this was an effective practice or simply another medieval oddity born of superstition and limited dental knowledge. Then there's the matter of sleepwear, which, contrary to modern images of bedsheets and nightgowns, was surprisingly variable. Some royals preferred to sleep naked, seeing it as a natural and healthful state, while others were wrapped in layers of linen or silk. Intriguingly, in some courts, sleeping nude was thought to facilitate conception, an idea wrapped up in notions of purity and openness to divine favor. Imagine the quiet flicker of candlelight revealing the delicate folds of silk draping a royal form, or the soft rustle of bare skin against linen sheets. Scholars still debate how widespread these customs were, and whether such practices varied significantly between regions or courts, in one of the more eccentric corners of royal ritual. Monarchs sometimes employed scented powders or oils applied directly to their skin after bathing. These weren't just for smell. They believed that certain oils could awaken the senses or balance the humors, a cornerstone concept in medieval medicine that posited bodily fluids affected health and temperament. One curious example involved the use of amber oil mixed with crushed petals, said to calm the nerves and invite pleasant dreams, which could, conveniently, segue into more intimate activities. And here's a slightly eyebrow-raising practice that definitely sounds like a plot twist in a medieval soap opera. Some monarchs kept special sleeping charms tucked beneath their pillows, tiny bags filled with herbs like lavender, mint, or even wormwood, believed to protect against nightmares and malevolent spirits. The overlap between superstition and practical comfort in the medieval bedroom was significant. You might imagine the nervous anticipation of a king clutching his charm before surrendering to sleep, hoping the unseen forces stay at bay. Historians still argue whether these charms were mostly psychological comforts or held genuine ritual importance. Of course, we can't ignore the presence of attendants, trusted servants, or ladies-in-waiting who sometimes assisted with these bedtime rituals. Their role wasn't merely practical, but also ceremonial. Some were responsible for applying oils, preparing the royal bath, or even whispering prayers alongside their sovereign. The dynamic between monarch and attendant in these moments was delicate, blending intimacy, trust, and the strict hierarchies of court life. One particularly quirky note: in some courts, certain attendants were thought to possess special love wisdom and might discreetly advise queens or kings on matters of desire. A medieval kind of romantic consultant, if you will. And what about the furnishings themselves? The royal bed wasn't just a place to lie down. It was an emblem of power. High canopies draped with heavy cloths, often embroidered with gold thread and family crests, created a sense of both luxury and privacy. But beyond aesthetics, some beds included peculiar features such as secret compartments or built-in stools designed to accommodate the unique needs of royal intimacy or modesty. Imagine the hushed conversations about which side of the bed to enter to avoid bad luck, or how the curtains had to be drawn a certain way to prevent evil eyes from interfering with the night's pleasures. Scholars still debate how much of this was practical and how much was steeped in superstition. As you settle into this reverie of medieval luxury and oddity, it's worth remembering that these bedtime rituals were a complex cocktail of hygiene, superstition, politics, and the very human desire for connection. They were as much about reinforcing the monarch's divine right and image as they were about actual pleasure. Sometimes, the strangest practices reflected deep anxieties about fertility, loyalty, or power, rather than simple romantic whims. So as you begin to feel your eyes grow heavy, and the flicker of candlelight seems to wane into the soft shadows of night. Imagine a medieval king or queen going through this elaborate ritual, not unlike your own nightly routines, but wrapped in layers of mystery, symbolism, and just a hint of bizarre. Remember that scented bath, the whispered prayers, the curious mix of ash and herbs on teeth, the soft music floating from a distant hall. These were moments where the personal and political, the sacred and sensual, all converged in the quiet dark. Sleep now gently. The past, strange as it was, continues to whisper through the ages. And who knows, maybe tonight your dreams will carry you back to those chambers, soft with silk and secrets. You're still lingering in the warm afterglow of that royal bath. The faint scent of lavender and ambergris still teasing your senses when the story draws you deeper into the mysterious world of medieval queens and their love potions. Now, these weren't your run-of-the-mill bottled perfumes or herbal teas. We're talking about carefully crafted elixirs brewed in secret chambers, often guarded with the same vigilance as the royal treasury itself. The queen's love potions were more than just romantic gestures. They were tools of power, desire, and sometimes survival, steeped in both science and superstition. Picture the queen's private apothecary, a dimly lit room lined with jars of crushed roots, dried petals, and mysterious powders. In the flickering candlelight, a trusted herbalist, or sometimes the queen herself, might be grinding ingredients with a mortar and pestle, blending rose hips, myrrh, and even the slightly alarming sounding Spanish fly, which was believed to ignite passion. Spanish fly, made from crushed beetles, was a favorite among the bold. But you probably won't survive the effects if you're not careful. It could cause all sorts of internal mischief. Historians still argue whether these potions truly worked, or were mostly symbolic gestures to assert control over a chaotic world of love and politics. The ingredients themselves are a fascinating mix of the natural and the mystical. Some recipes called for crushed pearls, thought to bring purity and fertility. Others relied on rare spices like saffron or cinnamon, imported from distant lands, which made the potions as expensive as they were effective, or at least they appeared to be. These were not the kind of concoctions you'd find at your local apothecary, but items carefully curated to impress, to intimidate, and to enchant. Imagine the delicate clink of glass vials and the faint, spicy scent that filled the air as these love potions were prepared behind closed doors. But it wasn't just about physical effects. These potions often had a psychological component. If the queen believed the potion would work, her confidence and allure would naturally increase. It's a classic case of placebo with a medieval twist. The ceremonial aspect was vital. The right incantations, the precise timing, sometimes aligning with lunar phases or feast days, added layers of meaning and power. The act of taking a love potion was as much about affirming one's status and intent as it was about arousing passion. Now, it gets even more intriguing when you consider that some of these potions were used not only to inspire desire, but also to influence fertility. In a time when producing an heir was not just a personal matter, but a political imperative, queens were desperate to do whatever might increase their chances. Herbal mixtures containing ingredients like willow bark, fennel, and even parts of animals were common. You might imagine the queen sipping a steaming cup of anise tea or applying a fragrant ointment, hoping it would summon the favor of fertility gods or nature itself. One particularly quirky tidbit: some recipes recommended that the queen wear a specific type of amulet or necklace infused with herbs from the potion, believing that the scent lingering close to the skin would enhance its effects throughout the day. This blend of aromatherapy and jewelry might sound modern, but the roots run deep in medieval belief systems. Historians still argue how widespread and effective these practices were, especially since many of these recipes were kept secret and passed down only within tight circles. You can't ignore the political side of these potions. A queen's ability to inspire desire wasn't just about private pleasure, it was a matter of statecraft. A well-timed love potion might secure the king's attention, especially in courts where royal affection was a valuable currency, and alliances hinged on personal favor. If a queen fell out of favor, the consequences could be dire: rumors, exile, or worse. So the art of love potion making was also the art of survival, blending seduction with strategy. Interestingly, some queens were suspected of using these potions on more than just their husbands. There are whispers in historical records about queens attempting to charm rival courtiers or even enemies, though such stories often veer into the realm of rumor and legend. It's one of those cases where separating fact from fiction is challenging, and historians still debate how much truth lies beneath the court gossip. You can imagine the whispered conversations in candlelit corridors, the sly smiles, and the wary glances cast in shadowy corners. The making and use of these potions also had a social dimension. Royal apothecaries, often women skilled in herbalism, were powerful figures behind the scenes. Their knowledge passed down through generations, blending empirical observation with folklore. Some of these women held significant influence, advising queens and nobles alike, walking a fine line between healer and witch. In some cases, accusations of witchcraft were a risk these women faced, especially if a potion's effects were unexpected or unwelcome. The tension between science and superstition was ever present. And then there's the question of consent and agency. While some love potions were self-administered, others were given surreptitiously, which raises ethical questions even by medieval standards. Did kings or nobles unknowingly consume these mixtures? Were love potions used as tools of coercion or control? It's a murky area that historians still explore, and you can imagine the court intrigue that would have swirled around such practices. Beyond the physical potions, the very idea of love itself was steeped in symbolic rituals. The medieval concept of courtly love, more on that later, intertwined with these potions, creating a cultural atmosphere where desire was both celebrated and constrained by strict codes. Love potions, then, became a metaphor for the intoxicating and sometimes dangerous power of attraction, wrapped in the mystique of alchemy and magic. So as you imagine the queen quietly sipping her mysterious brew, you might also picture the layers of meaning hidden in that simple act, a blend of hope, fear, and ambition, all distilled into a fragrant liquid. The dim glow of the apothecary's lamps, the faint clinking of bottles, and the delicate scent of crushed herbs create a scene as intoxicating as any potion itself. As your eyelids grow heavier, you might wonder about the legacy of these love potions. Did they truly sway the hearts of kings? Or were they merely part of a larger performance, a dance of power and passion set to the slow rhythms of medieval court life? Historians still argue whether the potions were mostly symbolic or had genuine physiological effects. But one thing is clear: they remain one of the most fascinating windows into the intimate and often secret lives of medieval royalty. The next time you reach for a bottle of perfume or a calming tea before bed, remember that somewhere in the medieval past, queens were brewing their own mysterious mixtures, blending nature, magic, and love into a single sip. And as the night deepens, that thought might just lull you a little closer to sleep, wrapped in the warm, fragrant shadows of history's most curious love potions. You follow the winding corridors of the castle, the distant echoes of revelry and whispered court secrets fading as you draw closer to the hidden chambers where kings conducted their most discreet affairs. Behind thick oak doors, away from prying eyes and wagging tongues, the king's secret lovers found refuge: women, and sometimes men, carefully chosen, carefully concealed, and often bearing their own stories of power and peril. These clandestine relationships weren't merely scandalous liaisons. They formed an intricate web of political strategy, personal desire, and court intrigue, often accompanied by a suite of unusual arrangements designed to keep everything under wraps. Imagine a secret signal system, discreet as a flutter of a handkerchief or a hidden candle in the window, letting a lover know when to approach or retreat. Kings often used coded messages passed through trusted servants or jester intermediaries. One quirky example is the use of colored gloves or special rings as silent indicators. These tokens could mean everything from meet me in the garden to danger, retreat immediately. Historians still argue how widespread and sophisticated these signaling systems were, but the very idea paints a vivid picture of the constant balancing act between secrecy and desire. These secret lovers occupied peculiar spaces within the palace, hidden chambers, rarely used guest rooms, or even underground passages. The architecture of royal residences sometimes included purpose-built rooms for these rendezvous, complete with soundproofing features or concealed entrances. It's a little like medieval Arabim, but with a decidedly more hush-hush vibe. Imagine the heavy stone walls muffling whispered conversations and laughter, the flicker of candlelight revealing furtive glances and stolen moments. But it wasn't just about physical concealment. These relationships operated within a complex social hierarchy. Some secret lovers were officially recognized as favorites, lavished with gifts, titles, or even lands, while others remained shadows in the background, vulnerable to jealousy and political fallout. One fascinating tidbit: some kings maintained multiple secret lovers simultaneously, each unaware of the others, creating a labyrinth of deception that could rival any modern soap opera. Scholars still debate how much overlap there was between political alliances and romantic entanglements, and to what extent these affairs influenced broader court politics. You might wonder how these secret lovers were chosen. It wasn't always about beauty or charm. Often, these individuals possessed unique talents, singing, dancing, or political savvy, that made them valuable companions beyond the bedroom. In some cases, a secret lover might act as a trusted advisor or confidant, wielding subtle influence over the king's decisions. This blurred line between intimacy and politics was a hallmark of medieval court life, where personal relationships often dictated the fate of kingdoms. Consider the precarious position of these lovers. While proximity to the king could mean favor and fortune, it also carried risks. Fall from grace was swift and brutal, sometimes resulting in exile, imprisonment, or worse. Rival courtiers and jealous nobles were quick to exploit any scandal, turning private affairs into public spectacles designed to embarrass or remove political threats. One particularly dramatic case involved a queen discovering her husband's secret lover and retaliating with accusations of witchcraft, a common weapon in the arsenal of medieval power struggles. Historians still argue about the extent to which such scandals shaped the politics of the era. Gifts played a crucial role in maintaining these secret relationships. Kings showered their favorites with jewels, fine fabrics, and exotic delicacies. Some gifts carried symbolic meaning: pearls for purity, roses for passion, or even rare birds that might be released as tokens of affection. You can almost hear the clink of gold chains and the rustle of silk as these treasures changed hands in secret. But these exchanges were more than mere tokens of love. They were political statements, signals to the court about who held influence and favor. In some cases, gifting rivaled the grand ceremonies of official diplomacy. The role of the royal jester in this romantic drama shouldn't be underestimated. These jesters were not merely entertainers, but often trusted intermediaries between the king and his secret lovers. They delivered messages, smoothed over conflicts, and sometimes even orchestrated meetings under the guise of performances or games. This unusual role placed jesters at the heart of court intrigue, balancing humor with subtlety. Imagine a jester juggling balls while discreetly slipping a folded note into a lover's hand, the audience none the wiser. Scholars still debate just how much power jesters wielded behind their painted smiles. Secret lovers weren't exclusively female either. Some kings formed intimate bonds with male companions, often younger nobles or favored pages. These relationships carried their own social dynamics and risks, existing within a culture where sexuality was viewed through different lenses than today. The medieval court's attitudes toward same-sex relationships were complex, marked by both tolerance in private and condemnation in public, often shaped by religious doctrine. This ambiguity added layers of tension to already precarious secret romances. The logistics of these relationships could be surprisingly elaborate. Couriers might be dispatched to arrange secret meetings outside the castle, or entire wings of a royal residence might be temporarily reserved for a favored companion. These arrangements required careful coordination to avoid the queen's suspicion or the gossiping tongues of courtiers. You might imagine a labyrinth of servants and spies, all playing roles in this delicate dance of discretion. Despite the secrecy, rumors and stories inevitably leaked into the public sphere, sometimes becoming the stuff of legend. Tales of secret tunnels, hidden doors, and forbidden trysts captured the imaginations of both contemporaries and later historians. Some stories became so widespread they shaped the popular image of medieval kings as both powerful rulers and passionate, if sometimes reckless, lovers, whether entirely true or embroidered over time. These legends reveal as much about medieval society's fascination with royal sexuality as they do about the individuals involved. The presence of secret lovers also influenced the official marriage bed. Kings often balanced their duties to produce heirs with their personal desires, a tension that could lead to complex family dynamics. Some queens tolerated their husbands' affairs for political reasons, while others actively sought to undermine rivals or regain favor. The domestic drama playing out behind closed doors was as intricate and volatile as any battlefield. One particularly curious practice involved night visits, where a secret lover might be admitted to the royal chambers under cover of darkness, often escorted by trusted servants. These visits had to be timed with the king's official duties and social calendar to avoid suspicion. The coordination and risk involved make you appreciate the elaborate precautions taken to maintain appearances and keep the court's gossip mill at bay. You can almost hear the hushed whispers in the corridors, the careful footsteps, the quick exchanges of secret glances. The king's secret lovers were a vital but shadowy part of medieval royal life, embodying the tension between public duty and private desire. Their stories remind us that behind the grandeur and ceremony, these were human relationships, complex, fragile, and often fraught with danger. As your eyelids begin to droop, let the image of those secret chambers linger, a place where power, passion, and peril entwined in the flickering candlelight. The coded signals the stolen moments, the lavish gifts, all parts of a medieval love story written in shadows. And as you drift into sleep, remember that even the mightiest kings navigated the delicate balance of love and secrecy, just as we all do in our own quiet ways. You're still wandering through the labyrinth of royal secrets, the scent of hidden chambers lingering faintly as you step now into a world where the most unusual methods of birth control flicker like whispered legends in the shadows of the medieval court. Unlike the frank conversations we have today, medieval royal contraceptive practices were veiled in mystery, superstition, and sometimes downright bizarre rituals. Kings and queens, desperate to control heirs and alliances, often resorted to measures that teetered between practical and downright absurd, some of which would make you wonder if they ever survived the experience. First, imagine the tightrope walk of medieval fertility politics. Producing heirs was essential. A royal line without successors was a disaster waiting to happen. Yet, there were moments when controlling conception became a strategic necessity, perhaps to avoid too many claimants or to time an heir's birth for political advantage. Unlike modern contraception, these methods were crude, unproven, and often risky. The royal chamber, instead of being a sanctuary of passion, sometimes became a battleground of careful calculation. Among the oddest reported contraceptive methods were herbal concoctions consumed by queens. Some herbs, such as pennyroyal, rue, and wild carrot seeds, were believed to prevent pregnancy or even induce miscarriage. Pennyroyal, in particular, was a popular choice, despite its known toxicity. You might picture a queen gingerly sipping a bitter tea brewed from crushed leaves, hoping for the best, but unaware of the dangers lurking in each drop. Historians still argue how widely these herbs were used in royal circles versus common folk, and to what extent their use was medically effective or simply a desperate hope. In addition to ingestibles, there were bizarre physical methods. One method involved the use of sponges soaked in vinegar or other acidic substances inserted before intercourse to block conception. While sponges are still used today in certain forms of birth control, the medieval versions were less reliable and sometimes irritating, hardly a recipe for a relaxing evening. The thought of a queen enduring such discomfort for political reasons adds a curious layer to the image of royal intimacy. You may be surprised to learn that some medieval sources hint at the use of animal parts in contraceptive mixtures. For example, powdered crocodile dung, though sounding more like a prank, was reputedly used in Egypt and parts of the medieval Mediterranean world as a pessary, a device placed in the vagina to prevent pregnancy. While this may seem utterly bizarre, it reflects the mingling of folk medicine and royal practice. Historians still debate whether such practices actually reached European courts or remained confined to other regions. The timing of intercourse itself was considered a method of control. Medieval medical theory, influenced by the humoral system, suggested that conception was more likely during certain phases of a woman's menstrual cycle or the moon's phases. Thus, couples, royal or otherwise, might abstain during dangerous times. While this sounds like an early form of rhythm method, its effectiveness was questionable at best. Still, the belief in celestial influence over fertility added a poetic, if frustrating, dimension to the royal bedroom. One particularly fascinating and frankly odd method involved the use of amulets and charms believed to ward off unwanted conception. These ranged from inscribed pieces of parchment tucked into undergarments to tiny figurines made of wax or metal. Some were blessed by clergy blending religious faith with folk superstition. Imagine a queen clutching a small charm beneath her gown, hoping divine protection would do what medicine could not. Historians continue to debate the extent to which religion and superstition shaped contraceptive practices. The secrecy surrounding these methods was intense. Discussing contraception openly was taboo, especially in the highly public lives of monarchs. Any hint of a royal couple avoiding conception could spark scandal, accusations of infidelity, or worse. It's easy to imagine whispered conversations in dimly lit chambers, coded language exchanged between trusted attendants and the queen herself. The need for discretion adds a layer of intrigue to the already complicated politics of royal reproduction. Interestingly, some royals took a more mechanical approach. There are scattered reports of early versions of barrier methods, like linen sheaths or animal bladders, used as primitive condoms. While the craftsmanship and effectiveness were rudimentary, it shows a willingness to experiment with physical means of birth control. The thought of a medieval king fumbling with such devices might bring a chuckle, or perhaps some sympathy. The role of servants and medical practitioners was crucial in administering these contraceptives. Trusted apothecaries, often women skilled in herbalism, would prepare mixtures, advise on timing, and sometimes even fabricate rudimentary devices. Their knowledge walked a fine line between accepted medicine and forbidden arts, exposing them to both favor and suspicion. The complexity of these relationships added to the drama of royal sexual politics. And yet, despite all these efforts, royal families often faced the tragic reality of infant mortality, miscarriage, and childlessness. The intense pressure to produce heirs sometimes pushed monarchs toward desperate measures, including dangerous abortive methods or even accusations of witchcraft against those who failed to conceive. These dark undercurrents remind us of the fragility behind the opulence of court life. It's worth noting that royal contraceptive practices varied widely depending on geography, culture, and the reigning monarch's personal beliefs. Some courts embraced more open discussions about fertility, while others shrouded the subject in mystery and silence. The shifting tides of religious doctrine also influenced what was considered acceptable, with the Church's official stance condemning contraception, but often turning a blind eye to the realities of political necessity. Imagine, then, the medieval royal couple caught between duty and desire, navigating a maze of superstition, medical guesswork, and political pressure, all while maintaining the public facade of harmonious rule. The bedroom, far from a place of simple pleasure, was a space charged with tension and calculation. As your thoughts drift toward sleep, picture the faint glow of a candle illuminating a queen's anxious face as she contemplates the bitter herbal brew before her. The scent of crushed herbs mingles with the heavy drapes, the soft rustle of silk punctuating the silence. The strange and often risky world of medieval contraception reveals the human heart beneath royal grandeur, flawed, hopeful, and endlessly searching for control in a world ruled by fate. And so, as the night deepens and the court settles into slumber, remember that even kings and queens faced the uncertainty and complexity of love, desire, and control. Their methods may seem bizarre now, but they were attempts to navigate the universal mysteries of human intimacy, wrapped in the rich tapestry of medieval life. You find yourself now stepping into a part of the medieval royal world where water, skin, and public perception intertwine in surprising and sometimes contradictory ways. The idea that medieval kings and queens were either obsessively clean or totally foul-smelling is a tale as old as time, but the reality is far more nuanced and sometimes downright peculiar. Royal nudity and bathing practices were shaped by cultural beliefs, practical concerns, and social norms that could seem both extravagant and oddly restrained, depending on which castle you peek inside. Imagine the royal bathhouse, a high-ceilinged chamber with stone walls, warmed by fires, and filled with steam from large copper tubs. The water is scented with rose petals, herbs, and perhaps even a dash of costly spices imported from far-flung lands. Bathing was a ritual of status and luxury as much as hygiene, and medieval royals often took these soaks with an eye toward relaxation, health, and preparation for more intimate encounters. You can almost hear the gentle splash as attendants help the queen settle into the warm water. The soft clinking of glass bottles containing oils and powders lining the shelves. But here's the twist. While bathing was a sign of refinement, it was not always frequent. Concerns about drying out the skin or exposing the body to cold drafts meant some royals bathed only occasionally, preferring to freshen themselves with scented cloths or dry baths using powders. This mix of indulgence and caution created a fascinating tension. The desire for cleanliness was tempered by fears about health. Historians still argue how often bathing truly occurred in royal courts, with some evidence suggesting more regular washing than commonly thought, especially among the elite. When it came to nudity, the medieval world was surprisingly fluid in its attitudes, at least within the confines of the royal household. Unlike today's more prudish views, it was not uncommon for kings and queens to appear naked in the company of close attendants during baths or dressing rituals. Privacy, as we understand it, was rare. Layers of servants and courtiers might be present during morning routines or preparations for important events. This communal nudity wasn't seen as scandalous, but as part of the practicalities of court life. Yet in public or ceremonial settings, modesty was paramount. The clothing worn by royalty was elaborate and symbolic, often layered to display wealth and rank. Think heavy velvets, shimmering silks, and intricate embroidery, not exactly conducive to quick changes or secret rendezvous. This duality between private comfort and public spectacle shaped royal dress codes and nudity norms in curious ways. One particularly quirky practice involved the use of special bathing suits, or at least what might be considered their ancestors. Some accounts suggest that royal children or attendants might wear simple linen coverings during bathing, balancing modesty with practicality. Whether adult royals ever used such garments remains unclear, but the idea itself points to an evolving sense of personal boundaries. The royal bedchamber also played a role in this dance of exposure and concealment. Beds were often draped with heavy curtains that could be drawn for privacy, but these were as much about warmth and noise reduction as modesty. The idea of complete privacy was foreign. Intimate moments were sometimes witnessed or interrupted by attendants with strictly defined roles. It's a world where your concept of personal space might feel stretched thin, yet trust and hierarchy maintained order. And here's a sensory detail you might appreciate. The skincare routines of medieval royals often involved oils and balms made from natural ingredients. These weren't just for appearance, but for protection against the harshness of stone walls, fireplaces, and drafty chambers. Lavender, almond oil, and rosewater were favorites, creating a subtle fragrance that mingled with the warmth of the skin. Imagine the soft scent lingering in the air as the queen moves through her morning rituals, a silent signature of her presence. Public bathing was less common for royalty, but did occur, especially during certain festivals or religious occasions. Some kings and queens would participate in communal baths with their courtiers or subjects, a practice that blurred social boundaries and emphasized ritual purity. Yet, these occasions were often surrounded by elaborate rules and ceremonies, ensuring that the spectacle reinforced status rather than diminishing it. You can almost see the throng of nobles, the splashing water, the hushed conversations beneath heavy tapestries. Interestingly, medieval art and literature sometimes depict scenes of royal nudity or bathing with symbolic meaning. These images communicated ideas of purity, renewal, or vulnerability, layered with political or religious significance. One quirky example is the baptism by fire trope, where a king's nakedness symbolized his spiritual cleansing or readiness for leadership. Historians still debate the interpretation of these artistic motifs, reflecting the rich symbolism surrounding the human body. Health beliefs also influenced nudity practices. The humoral theory suggested that exposing skin to fresh air or sunlight could balance bodily fluids and promote well-being. This idea might lead a king to strip down on a balcony for a brief air bath, an image that combines practicality with a touch of eccentricity. The delicate dance between health, modesty, and symbolism shaped many such behaviors. Another curious tidbit involves royal footwear and nudity, or lack thereof. While the idea of a barefoot king or queen may seem intimate, medieval etiquette often demanded that royal feet be covered in slippers or socks, even in private chambers. Footwear was a marker of status and propriety, and going barefoot could be seen as inappropriate or even disrespectful. Imagine the rustle of fine leather slippers across polished stone floors, a subtle reminder that even the smallest details mattered. The role of attendants again comes into focus. These trusted servants helped dress and undress the monarchs, applied oils, and ensured that the royal body was cared for according to the highest standards. The physical intimacy of these tasks was accepted within the strict social hierarchy, blending practicality with ritual. In some courts, particular attendants were chosen for their discretion and loyalty, becoming vital figures in the daily lives of the royal family. And then there's the fascinating contrast between the royal attitude toward their own nudity and how they wished to be seen by others. Portraits, for example, rarely depict naked monarchs, focusing instead on regalia and symbols of power. The naked body was private, sacred, or even dangerous if revealed publicly. Yet the myths and stories about royal bathing and nakedness persisted in folklore, sometimes exaggerated to emphasize virtues or vices. As you imagine this world of scented baths, velvet drapes, and shared nudity, you might reflect on the strange balance medieval royals maintained between exposure and concealment, between public spectacle and private care. It's a dance as delicate as the rustle of silk sheets or the flicker of a candle in a drafty chamber. So as your eyes grow heavy and the sounds of the court fade to silence, picture a queen slowly stepping from her bath, the soft touch of a servant's hands drying her skin, the lingering fragrance of roses wrapping around her like a secret cloak, the warmth of the water giving way to the cool air of the chamber, the heavy curtains closing softly behind her. Let the quiet intimacy of that moment soothe you as you drift closer to sleep, wrapped in the gentle mystery of medieval royal life, where even the simplest acts held layers of meaning, and nudity was neither shame nor scandal, but a quiet, essential part of being human. You're still nestled in the softly glowing world of medieval courts, the whispers of silk and candlelight guiding you as we explore one of the more curious customs tied to royal intimacy, the peculiar rituals surrounding royal fertility tests and preparations. In an era when producing heirs was not just a personal matter, but a national imperative, the stakes were unimaginably high. Kings and queens, their courts, and the kingdom itself revolved around the success or failure of these deeply private and often bizarre procedures. Imagine the anxious atmosphere before a royal couple was expected to conceive. There was no just trying with a casual attitude. Everything was steeped in ritual and precaution. Both parties underwent various tests to prove their fertility, or more often, to pinpoint where the problem lay when heirs failed to materialize. The process was invasive, often embarrassing, and filled with superstition and medical misunderstanding. But the consequences of failure made it unavoidable. One mainstream historical fact is that medieval medicine was heavily influenced by the humoral theory, which posited that health and fertility depended on the balance of four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Fertility tests often involved examining bodily fluids and physical attributes believed to signal reproductive health. For instance, doctors might assess the king's semen for color and consistency, or the queen's menstrual cycle and vaginal secretions. You can almost feel the discomfort of these examinations. The chilly chambers where a royal physician, cloaked in authority and smelling faintly of herbs, scrutinizes intimate details. Beyond the medical, there was a thick fog of superstition. One fringe tidbit involved the use of trial marriages or trial nights, where a couple might be separated for a time and then brought together under controlled circumstances to see if conception occurred. Sometimes, the king's servants or trusted courtiers were tasked with observing, though always discreetly, to note any signs of fertility or barrenness. The idea of courtly voyeurism adds a faintly comic yet unsettling layer to the process. Historians still argue how common these practices were, and whether they were official procedures or whispered rumors exaggerated over time. Preparation for conception often involved dietary and lifestyle adjustments, as doctors and astrologers recommended specific foods and activities to enhance fertility. Kings might be advised to eat rich, warming foods like lamb or eggs, while queens were encouraged to drink herbal infusions such as raspberry leaf or red clover. There was also a belief that certain times of the year, lunar phases, or even planetary alignments could improve the chances of conception, turning the bedroom into an astrological battleground. You can almost hear the astrologers' soft murmurings blending with the rustle of silk sheets as the royal couple waits for the stars to align. Another fascinating detail involves fertility charms and talismans worn or carried by the royal couple. These objects, often inscribed with prayers, symbols, or magical words, were believed to protect and encourage conception. Some were passed down through generations, becoming family heirlooms imbued with power and hope. Imagine the queen clutching a small amulet beneath her gown during a night fraught with anticipation, its weight both comforting and heavy with expectation. Scholars still debate how much these charms influenced behavior versus how much they were psychological crutches in an uncertain world. There were also some surprisingly practical methods to assess fertility. For example, the so-called witness test involved a trusted individual observing the couple's first night together to confirm consummation had occurred. This practice underscores the intense social and political pressures surrounding royal procreation. No one wanted ambiguity about whether the king had fulfilled his duty. Though uncomfortable by modern standards, these rituals highlight the collective investment in royal sexuality. Yet, for all the seriousness, there were moments of gentle humor and humanity. Some accounts describe nervous kings fumbling awkwardly, queens hiding laughter behind their fans, or courtiers exchanging knowing glances. These little glimpses remind us that despite the grand stakes, these were people grappling with the universal messiness of love and reproduction. A particularly quirky anecdote involves a medieval remedy thought to awaken dormant fertility: the application of powdered mouse brains to certain body parts. While you're probably glad that practice didn't survive, it reveals how deeply medieval medicine was a blend of observation, myth, and guesswork. The fact that such ideas coexisted with more logical approaches makes the whole process feel like a strange theater of hope and desperation. Attendants played a crucial role, often overseeing the queen's preparation, applying herbal concoctions, and providing emotional support. These women, sometimes midwives or trusted ladies-in-waiting, formed a vital but discreet support system. Their knowledge, passed down orally and through practice, was invaluable, though often overshadowed by the male physicians who received more historical attention. Imagine the quiet conversations, the soft touch of hands smoothing worry lines, and the whispered reassurances that all would be well. In some courts, fertility problems were blamed on the supernatural, curses, evil spirits, or divine punishment. This belief sometimes led to elaborate rituals designed to cleanse the couple spiritually. Holy water, incense, and prayers formed a backdrop to these rituals, blending religion with fertility practices in ways that modern sensibilities might find both comforting and bewildering. You might picture a candlelit chapel filled with murmured prayers as the royal couple seeks divine favor for their future. Despite all these efforts, infertility or childlessness could devastate a royal couple's position. Without an heir, the stability of the kingdom was at risk, and blame often fell heavily on the queen. This dynamic fueled court intrigue, rumors, and sometimes tragic outcomes. The intense pressure to conceive was a silent but ever-present force shaping the lives and relationships of medieval monarchs. As your eyes grow heavy, picture the mix of hope and anxiety filling the royal chambers, the scent of herbs mingling with the faint chill of stone walls, the weight of expectation pressing down like the heavy velvet drapes. The rituals, the tests, the charms, they were all part of the same delicate dance of power, love, and survival. And as you drift closer to sleep, remember that behind every throne was a story of human longing and vulnerability, played out in whispered prayers, awkward fumblings, and hopeful glances toward the stars. You find yourself settling deeper into the softly shadowed courts of medieval royalty, where love and politics intertwine in ways as tangled as the intricate tapestries lining the castle walls. Now, imagine the delicate and often awkward dance of royal courtship rituals. A slow, deliberate performance designed as much to convey power and status as to kindle genuine affection. These rituals, steeped in symbolism and etiquette, were carefully choreographed to ensure that love, or at least the appearance of it, served the kingdom's greater needs. Picture yourself at a grand hall, the faint flicker of candlelight casting long shadows across marble floors. The king or queen stands amidst courtiers dressed in their finest, every gesture scrutinized and every glance calculated. Courtship here wasn't a spontaneous exchange, but a slow-moving game of signals, bows, whispered compliments, and the subtle exchange of gifts, all layered with meaning. Historians still argue how much genuine feeling mingled with political strategy. But the tension between duty and desire created a fascinating atmosphere. One of the most charming and quirky aspects of these rituals was the use of symbolic gifts, tokens of affection that were both personal and political. Roses, embroidered gloves, and even poetry were exchanged with great ceremony. Imagine a queen receiving a delicate glove, the intricate stitching a message of favor and protection. These objects weren't just romantic gestures, they were political statements, signaling alliances, promises, or even veiled warnings. The tradition of love tokens has echoes in modern customs, but took on a uniquely elaborate form in medieval courts. Music and dance were essential parts of courtship, creating a backdrop of graceful movement and shared experiences. Minstrels played gentle melodies, and nobles participated in carefully structured dances that allowed for fleeting touches and furtive glances. These dances followed strict rules, no spontaneous embraces allowed, but the ritualized contact created an intimate tension that fueled rumors and gossip. You can almost hear the soft rustle of silk skirts and the tapping of delicate shoes on polished stone. A particularly intriguing practice involved the use of courtly love poetry, a genre full of idealized, sometimes exaggerated expressions of devotion and longing. These poems, often performed aloud by troubadours, presented love as noble and ennobling, though often distant and unfulfilled. The tension between physical desire and spiritual admiration is a hallmark of the era's romantic expression. Imagine a bard's voice weaving words of praise that simultaneously flatter and frustrate the beloved, turning love into an art form layered with meaning. These courtship rituals extended beyond the noble halls into elaborate banquets and feasts, where food, drink, and conversation were part of the dance. The sharing of sweetmeats or the pouring of wine could be loaded with meaning, signaling interest or testing loyalty. The careful balance of public display and private communication made these gatherings electric with possibility and peril. Yet these rituals were not without their risks. Missteps could lead to scandal or political fallout, especially when courtship blurred the lines between official engagement and secret romance. The court was rife with gossip, and rumors could spread like wildfire, sometimes weaponized by rivals seeking to undermine a noble's reputation. One amusing anecdote involves a courtier who mistakenly presented a love token to the wrong lady, triggering a cascade of awkward explanations and whispered jokes. Historians still debate how much such errors influenced court politics. Gender roles played a critical part in these rituals. While kings and princes often took the lead in courtship, queens and noblewomen wielded considerable influence through their choice of suitors and their skill in navigating the social maze. Some women mastered the art of subtle rejection or acceptance, using wit and grace to maintain power and protect their interests. The interplay of agency and expectation adds a rich layer to our understanding of medieval romance. Courtship also involved elaborate gift exchanges that sometimes included animals, such as falcons or horses, symbols of nobility and strength. Imagine a queen receiving a rare falcon as a sign of favor, the bird's keen eyes and swift flight embodying the qualities admired in a lover. These gifts reinforced social hierarchies and conveyed messages that words alone could not. A quirky yet fascinating aspect of courtship was the use of perfumes and scents. Certain fragrances were believed to attract or repel, and nobles often wore custom-blended perfumes crafted by royal apothecaries. Imagine the subtle waft of lavender or musk accompanying a noblewoman's entrance, a silent signal to all in the room. These scents became part of the sensory language of attraction and status. The rituals also extended to clothing choices, where colors and fabrics carried symbolic weight. Red might suggest passion or courage, while blue conveyed loyalty and constancy. A gown embroidered with gold thread spoke of wealth and influence, and even the cut of a garment could indicate openness or reservation. Fashion became a language through which desire and social position were communicated with precision. Beyond the nobles, servants and attendants played their own subtle roles in courtship, often acting as messengers or facilitators. Trusted ladies-in-waiting might pass notes or arrange secret meetings, while jesters and musicians created opportunities for lovers to connect under the guise of entertainment. This hidden network added depth and intrigue to the public spectacle. And then there's the role of chivalry, the idealized code that guided noble behavior in love and war. Knights were expected to demonstrate bravery, honor, and devotion, often dedicating their feats to a lady's honor. The performance of chivalric love created a romanticized backdrop against which real emotions and political ambitions played out. You can almost see a knight lowering his visor and offering a token to a queen, the air thick with ceremony and unspoken promise. Of course, not all courtship was sweet or successful. Rivalries, jealousy, and heartbreak were common, and some alliances forged through courtship were fraught with tension. The stories of rejected suitors or spurned queens reveal the high emotional stakes beneath the polished surface of royal rituals. As your mind drifts, imagine the soft glow of torchlight illuminating a medieval ballroom, the gentle music weaving through the air, the delicate touch of hands in a dance, and the silent messages carried in a glance or a token. The slow rhythm of courtship is like a lullaby, a carefully measured performance where power, desire, and tradition entwine. And as you sink deeper into rest, let the echoes of this medieval dance soothe you, a reminder that love, even when choreographed by protocol and politics, is a human story, timeless, complex, and quietly beautiful. You drift now into a quieter, more shadowed corner of medieval royal life, where the nightly habits of kings and queens unfold like a slow, mysterious ritual. The bedroom, that most private of chambers, becomes a stage for practices, both intimate and peculiar, practices that balanced comfort, power, and sometimes downright odd superstition. As you imagine the flickering candlelight and soft rustle of silk, you find yourself immersed in a world where sleep itself was a carefully curated affair, designed to promote health, ensure succession, and occasionally to manage scandal. Let's start with the royal bed itself. Unlike the simple beds we picture today, medieval royal beds were elaborate constructions, massive wooden frames draped with heavy curtains, adorned with richly embroidered hangings, and piled high with mattresses, feather beds, and pillows. These beds were not just for sleeping. They were symbols of status, privacy, and even political theater. Imagine sinking into such a bed, the weight of silken covers, and the scent of lavender-infused linens wrapping around you like a protective cloak. One curious fact is that royal beds were often shared by more than just the king and queen. It was not unusual for attendants, such as ladies-in-waiting, to remain nearby, or even in the bedchamber itself during the night, ready to assist or observe. This arrangement might strike you as invasive today, but it was part of the careful watchfulness required to safeguard the monarch's health and reputation. Historians still argue how much actual privacy was enjoyed by medieval royals, but the concept of a solitary night seems rare. Now, let's talk about royal sleeping schedules. Unlike the modern notion of a continuous 8-hour sleep, medieval sleep was often segmented into first and second sleeps, with a waking period in between. Kings and queens might rise briefly during the night for prayer, conversation, or even intimate encounters. This pattern was believed to align with natural rhythms and was widely accepted across Europe. Imagine the quiet stillness punctuated by soft prayers or whispered exchanges in the dark. Management of sleep was also tied to health beliefs. Royal physicians advised on ideal sleeping positions, bedding materials, and even times to retire and rise. For example, sleeping with the head slightly elevated was thought to aid digestion and prevent disease. Some nobles used special pillows stuffed with medicinal herbs like rosemary or mint, believed to ward off nightmares or illness. You can almost smell the faint herbal aroma mingling with the warmth of the chamber as the monarch settles down. Royal sleepwear was another fascinating aspect. While today we think of pajamas as soft, cozy garments, medieval royals often wore linen nightshirts, simple but carefully made pieces that balanced comfort with hygiene. These shirts were changed frequently to maintain cleanliness, a practice reflecting the awareness that skin health was vital. Some nightshirts were embroidered with symbols of protection, adding a spiritual layer to the nightly routine. Dreams held a special place in the royal mind. They were often interpreted as omens or messages from the divine, guiding decisions or foretelling events. Monarchs might keep dream interpreters or advisors close, ready to analyze nocturnal visions. One particularly quirky custom involved placing certain objects under the pillow, such as a piece of parchment, with a prayer to encourage auspicious dreams. The blurred line between superstition and spirituality adds a layer of mystique to medieval sleep. Now consider the role of noise, or the lack thereof. The medieval castle was far from silent, with creaking beams, distant footsteps, and the occasional clatter of armor. To promote restful sleep, some royals used white noise-like sounds, such as the steady murmur of a fountain or the soft beating of a drum. These sounds masked intrusive noises and created a calming ambience. Imagine the gentle rhythm lulling the monarch toward slumber. The presence of animals in the royal bedchamber adds another curious detail. Small dogs or cats were sometimes allowed to share the bed, both for companionship and believed health benefits. The warmth of a sleeping pet was thought to promote comfort and even protect against evil spirits. Of course, this also meant a few unexpected twitches and the occasional snore in the otherwise quiet night. Temperature regulation was a constant challenge. Castles could be drafty and cold, especially during winter. Royals used heavy blankets, fur throws, and even heated bricks wrapped in cloth to stay warm. The ritual of preparing the bed for warmth involved multiple attendants and careful timing. You might imagine the satisfying crackle of a nearby hearth and the soft rustle of covers being arranged just so. Hygiene before bed was also a ritualized affair. Bathing, as you might recall from earlier sections, was often done in the evening, followed by the application of scented oils and powders. The scent of rosewater or almond oil lingered as the monarch slipped beneath the covers, a sensory cue signaling rest and renewal. One particularly strange custom involved sleeping charms. Placed near the bed, small amulets, written prayers, or herbal sachets designed to ward off nightmares or restless spirits. These objects reflected the medieval belief that the night was a time of spiritual vulnerability. You can almost feel the gentle reassurance these charms provided as the monarch drifted off. The act of falling asleep itself was sometimes aided by gentle distractions. Soft music played on a lute or harp, a whispered story from a trusted attendant, or even a slow rocking of the bed could ease the mind. These calming techniques predate our modern lullabies and white noise machines by centuries, revealing a universal desire for peaceful rest. Despite these rituals, sleep disturbances were common, whether due to illness, anxiety, or the constant demands of royal duty. Monarchs might rise during the night to attend to urgent matters, or simply because their minds would not rest. The image of a restless king pacing behind heavy curtains is as vivid as the scenes of court intrigue that unfolded by day. As your own eyelids begin to droop, imagine the soft flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, the gentle breath of a monarch settling into sleep, surrounded by attendants, pets, and charms. The medieval night is alive with quiet rituals designed to soothe and protect. A fragile cocoon woven from belief, comfort, and necessity. Let yourself be carried by the gentle rhythm of this ancient bedtime, a slow journey into rest beneath the watchful eyes of stars and the whispered prayers of the castle's inhabitants. The world outside may be vast and unpredictable, but here, in the royal chamber, peace descends softly like a feather, inviting you to surrender to sleep's gentle embrace. You glide now into the tangled web of medieval royal sexuality, where power, pleasure, and politics twist together like the intricate braids in a queen's hair. The royal bedroom was never simply a place for private enjoyment. It was a battleground where alliances were forged, loyalties tested, and reputations made or broken. In this complex theater, sexual behavior among kings and queens was heavily influenced by social expectations, personal desires, and the ever-watchful eyes of court society. Consider first the king's role as both a lover and a ruler. His sexual prowess was not just a personal matter, but a symbol of vitality and divine favor. Stories abounded of kings whose vigor was said to ensure the kingdom's prosperity, while impotence could be read as a sign of weakness or even divine disapproval. This created immense pressure on monarchs to perform, sometimes leading to bizarre remedies and rituals aimed at boosting virility. You might imagine a king secretly consuming strange potions or consulting eccentric healers, all under the guise of protecting his reign. One mainstream historical fact is that royal men often maintained relationships outside marriage with mistresses who sometimes wielded surprising influence. These relationships could be openly acknowledged or shrouded in secrecy, depending on the monarch's temperament and the court's tolerance. The presence of mistresses was a delicate balancing act. They could be sources of pleasure, political allies, or dangerous rivals. Historians still argue how these liaisons shaped policy and succession, revealing a world where love and power were deeply intertwined. The queen's sexuality was subject to even more scrutiny. Expected to be chaste, yet fertile, loyal, yet alluring, she navigated a narrow path between personal autonomy and public expectation. Her virtue was a political asset, and rumors about infidelity or passion could have deadly consequences. Yet, Within the confines of court life, queens sometimes found subtle ways to express desire and influence their partners. Imagine the coded language of glances, touches, and gifts that conveyed messages beyond words. A particularly quirky and less well-known detail involves the use of love potions or aphrodisiacs in the royal household. These concoctions, often made from herbs, animal parts, and spices, were believed to ignite passion or enhance fertility. Some recipes sound more like medieval chemistry experiments than love aids. Think crushed pearls, dragon's blood resin, or powdered rhino horn. While you probably won't survive tasting these, they reflect a genuine belief in the magical properties of substances to affect the body and spirit. Scholars still debate how seriously these potions were taken versus their role as courtly theater. Sexual etiquette was a complex code governed by religion, custom, and politics. For example, certain days or seasons were deemed inappropriate for intimacy, influenced by church teachings or superstitions. The idea that conception was sinful or unlucky during Lent or Advent shaped royal sexual calendars in surprising ways. Imagine a king consulting his confessor about whether he could share a bed with his queen without risking damnation or political scandal. These moral considerations created a rhythm of desire and restraint that framed royal sexuality. The physical spaces of royal intimacy also reflected these tensions. Royal chambers were often adorned with symbolic art and furnishings designed to inspire or instruct lovers. Tapestries depicting mythological love stories, carved beds with hidden compartments, or even secret passages for discreet meetings. Each element shaped the experience of desire. You can almost see a queen tracing her fingers over an embroidered scene of Venus and Mars, finding both comfort and inspiration. Public displays of affection were rare, but not unheard of. A king might publicly embrace his queen during ceremonies, signaling favor and legitimacy. Yet such gestures were calculated, balancing genuine emotion with political messaging. Courtiers watched closely for signs of approval or discord, using these moments to adjust alliances and ambitions. The line between personal intimacy and public performance was often blurred. Jealousy and rivalry were constant companions. Mistresses might feud with queens, nobles might compete for favors, and entire factions could rise or fall based on perceived sexual alliances. The court was a hive of intrigue, where whispers about affairs could topple ministers or destabilize reigns. One amusing anecdote tells of a courtier who mistakenly praised the king's mistress in a letter meant for the queen, sparking a flurry of defensive poetry and dueling insults. Historians still puzzle over how much truth lurks behind such stories. Another fascinating aspect is the role of sexual rituals and ceremonies in royal weddings and coronations. These events combined sacred vows with explicit acknowledgement of the couple's duty to produce heirs. The consummation of marriage was often witnessed, or at least reported, to ensure legitimacy. This blend of intimacy and formality highlights how sex was inseparable from power and politics. The treatment of royal sexuality was also shaped by gendered assumptions about pleasure and desire. Men were often presumed to have insatiable appetites, while women's sexuality was more mysterious and controlled. Yet, some queens challenged these norms, using their sexuality to assert influence or manipulate political outcomes. The stories of figures like Eleanor of Aquitaine remind us that royal women could be as sexually and politically assertive as their male counterparts. And then there's the ever-present shadow of scandal. Accusations of adultery, illegitimate heirs, or inappropriate conduct could spark crises that threatened the monarchy itself. Managing these scandals required careful diplomacy, secrecy, and sometimes ruthless action. The court's response to such events often reveals the underlying power dynamics and societal values of the time. As your mind grows heavy, imagine the interplay of desire and duty unfolding behind velvet curtains, the whispered promises, the stolen glances, the complicated web of relationships that shaped a kingdom. The royal bedroom was more than a place of pleasure. It was a stage where the fate of nations was written in passion and politics. Let the complexity and humanity of these intimate stories soothe your thoughts. A reminder that even the most powerful were subject to the messy, unpredictable nature of love. You slip now into the world of medieval royal contraception and birth control, a subject wrapped in mystery, taboo, and the awkward practicalities of managing dynastic survival. In a time when heirs were both treasure and necessity, controlling reproduction was less about choice and more about strategy, fraught with contradictions between desire, duty, and the limits of contemporary knowledge. Imagine the secretive conversations, the whispered exchanges of recipes, and the carefully guarded knowledge passed among women's circles. One solid historical fact is that medieval royals had access to a surprising variety of contraceptive methods, though none were foolproof by modern standards. These ranged from herbal concoctions designed to prevent conception to physical barriers, though the latter were rare and often impractical. The use of pessaries, small, inserted devices made from various natural materials, was documented, though their effectiveness remains debated. Picture a queen discreetly preparing such a device, guided by a trusted midwife or healer. Herbal contraception was perhaps the most common method. Plants like pennyroyal, rue, and silphium, a now extinct plant once highly prized for its contraceptive properties, were brewed into teas or applied as ointments. Some of these herbs were also considered abortifacients, blurring the line between preventing pregnancy and terminating it. You can almost smell the bitter aromas of these brews, mingling with beeswax candles in a dimly lit chamber. Historians still argue about the safety and efficacy of these remedies, reflecting the gap between medieval medical theory and practice. Interestingly, royal knowledge of contraception was both guarded and shared. Queens, ladies-in-waiting and midwives often formed secret networks where information about fertility and control was exchanged. This clandestine sharing created a parallel system of women's knowledge that existed alongside official male-dominated medicine. Imagine the hushed tones in a chamber as a queen confides in her closest attendants, navigating the fine line between obedience and agency. Physical methods of birth control, such as withdrawal or timing intercourse around the menstrual cycle, were also practiced, though their success depended heavily on knowledge and discipline. Medieval medical texts contained advice on understanding fertility windows, though interpretations varied. The Church's stance on contraception further complicated matters, condemning artificial methods while often turning a blind eye to natural ones. This tension created a landscape of moral ambiguity. Some kings themselves were aware and involved in these practices. There are accounts of monarchs consenting to or even requesting contraception, balancing their desires with the political realities of succession and alliances. The idea of a king negotiating when to produce heirs introduces a surprisingly modern aspect to medieval royal sexuality. Royal weddings and pregnancies were carefully timed and managed, with contraception playing a role in political strategy. For example, delaying pregnancy to ensure stability or spacing children to secure multiple heirs were considerations that shaped intimate decisions. The court calendar and religious observances also influenced timing, as intercourse during certain holy periods was discouraged or forbidden. One quirky and less discussed contraceptive was the use of animal products, such as crocodile dung or goat bladders, fashioned into rudimentary barriers or pessaries. These practices sound bizarre today, but were believed to offer protection, albeit with questionable hygiene and success. You're probably glad these didn't become mainstream. Pregnancy itself was a public and political affair. Royal pregnancies were monitored closely, with midwives and physicians overseeing health and nutrition. The Queen's body was a vessel not just of life, but of dynastic continuity. Birth announcements, celebrations, and the anxious wait for a healthy heir were major court events, filled with superstition and ceremony. However, childbirth was dangerous, and the mortality rates for mothers and infants were high. This reality cast a long shadow over royal families, fueling fears and influencing decisions about contraception and family planning. The deaths of queens in childbirth could precipitate succession crises or political upheaval, underscoring the stakes involved. The Church's influence over contraception and sexuality added complexity. While condemning many forms of birth control, clergy sometimes offered ambiguous guidance, and enforcement varied by region and period. Some clerics promoted natural family planning, while others harshly punished perceived transgressions. This patchwork of attitudes created an environment where royal couples navigated moral, spiritual, and political challenges. Sexual pleasure and contraception were not necessarily opposed, in medieval thought. Some texts acknowledged women's desire and the role of sex in marital harmony, suggesting a nuanced view of intimacy. Yet, this acknowledgement existed alongside strictures about procreation and morality, revealing the era's contradictions. The transmission of contraceptive knowledge also crossed borders, with ideas and recipes traveling along trade routes and through royal marriages. Influences from Arabic medicine, classical antiquity, and folk traditions blended to shape medieval practices. Imagine a queen in Europe using remedies learned from a traveling healer who brought secrets from distant lands. Despite the challenges, some royal couples successfully managed their fertility, though the methods and motivations remain partially obscured by time. Their stories remind us that medieval royals, for all their grandeur, faced the same intimate dilemmas of family planning as anyone else. As you settle toward sleep, picture the quiet confidence of a queen, seated by a flickering hearth, sharing a whispered secret with her midwife, a recipe for control, comfort, and hope. The delicate balance of power and privacy, desire and duty, folds gently around you like a soft quilt, inviting peaceful rest. You settle now into the dimly lit corridors of medieval court scandal, where whispers and shadows shape the legacy of royal sexuality, with a strange blend of rumor, truth, and exaggeration. The royal bedroom, far from being a purely private retreat, was often the source of stories that rippled through the court like wildfire, fueling gossip, intrigue, and sometimes even political downfalls. These scandals were a fascinating mix of human frailty and the brutal demands of power, reminding you that even the most exalted were not immune to the messy realities of desire and reputation. Imagine a courtier nervously passing a note containing a juicy rumor, the candlelight flickering as the story spreads from hand to hand. Tales of illicit affairs, secret pregnancies, or forbidden liaisons carried enormous weight. A single whispered accusation could unravel alliances or inspire dramatic confrontations. Historians still argue over how many of these scandals were based in fact, and how many were products of courtly exaggeration or outright fabrication. One mainstream historical fact is that many medieval kings and queens faced public scrutiny for their sexual behavior, sometimes leading to trials or forced confessions. For example, accusations of adultery against queens could be grounds for annulment or even imprisonment, while kings were occasionally pressured to acknowledge or deny mistresses. The stakes were high, as sexual reputation was closely tied to legitimacy and power. A quirky and less well-known tidbit involves the use of chastity belts, devices allegedly worn by noblewomen to preserve virtue while their husbands were away. Though historians largely agree that many surviving examples were later inventions or ceremonial rather than practical, the idea itself has become a symbol of medieval control and paranoia. Some courts might have employed simpler measures, or strict supervision. But the myth persists as a reminder of anxieties surrounding female sexuality. The role of rumor mills and gossip in medieval courts cannot be overstated. These networks of information operated both openly and covertly, often driven by political motives. Nobles might spread stories to undermine rivals or elevate allies, using sexual scandal as a potent weapon. Imagine the subtle smiles and sharp glances exchanged during a feast, where a sly comment can change the course of a conversation or even a career. Religion added a heavy layer of complexity to royal scandals. The church wielded immense power over morality and could exert pressure to control or punish perceived sexual misconduct. Confessions, public penance, and ecclesiastical trials were tools used to enforce standards and protect social order. Yet, the church's own leaders were not immune to scandal, adding a layer of hypocrisy and intrigue. You might picture a bishop quietly turning a blind eye to court affairs while preaching chastity from the pulpit. Royal mistresses often occupied ambiguous positions in court life, simultaneously wielding influence and attracting suspicion. Some became patrons of the arts, advisors to kings, or even unofficial diplomats. Others were dismissed or exiled amid scandal. Their stories reveal the precarious balance between power and vulnerability in the royal sexual sphere. The queen's reaction to mistresses ranged from indifference to fierce rivalry, adding dramatic tension to the court. A particularly vivid scandal involved a queen accused of bearing an illegitimate child, sparking rumors that challenged the legitimacy of the heir. The court was divided, alliances shifted, and the monarch's reputation hung in the balance. Such events highlight the political consequences of sexual rumors and the fragility of dynastic security. Social class played a significant role in how scandals were perceived and managed. Nobles' indiscretions were often tolerated or hushed up, while lower status individuals faced harsher consequences. The royal family scandals were especially explosive due to their symbolic significance. This disparity underscores the intersection of sexuality, power, and social hierarchy. Another intriguing aspect is the use of coded language and symbolism to discuss sexual scandals. Poetry, art, and music often contained veiled references to courtly affairs, allowing nobles to comment on sensitive topics without direct accusation. Imagine a lute ballad hinting at a forbidden romance, performed before an audience who understood every double entendre. The tension between public image and private behavior created a dual existence for many royals. Maintaining the illusion of moral perfection was essential, even as private lives diverged sharply from public expectations. This duality fuels much of the fascination with medieval royal sexuality. Medical knowledge also played a role in scandals, especially regarding questions of fertility or health. Illnesses that affected sexual function or reproduction could spark rumors of infidelity or curse, further complicating personal and political relationships. As your thoughts grow heavy, picture a dimly lit chamber where whispered secrets drift like smoke, the delicate threads of rumor weaving a tapestry of power and vulnerability. The medieval court was a stage where sexuality and scandal danced a delicate waltz, both shaping and reflecting the complex human dramas of the time. Let these tales of intrigue and humanity lull you toward sleep, a reminder that behind every crown is a story, sometimes dark, sometimes tender, always deeply human. You slip now into the shadowed corridors of royal bedchamber customs, where nightly rituals surrounding cleanliness and grooming blend practicality, superstition, and luxury in unexpected ways. In an era when bathing was rare and water often scarce, medieval monarchs devised elaborate routines to maintain their appearance and health, all while navigating complex beliefs about purity, sin, and social status. Imagine the faint scent of rosewater mingling with the musty warmth of a chamber, attendants bustling quietly as they prepare the king or queen for sleep or mourning. Bathing, for example, was not the daily practice you might expect. Instead, royals bathed infrequently, often relying on more accessible methods like wiping down with linen cloths dampened with scented waters or oils. The royal bath, when taken, was a ceremony as much as hygiene. A large, ornately decorated tub filled with warm water, herbs, and sometimes rose petals. You can almost hear the soft splash as attendants help their sovereign into the water, the gentle fragrance of lavender or rosemary filling the air. Historians still debate how often these baths occurred and whether the health risks outweighed the benefits. Beyond bathing, grooming was a carefully managed affair. Kings and queens prized smooth skin, shiny hair, and clean nails, symbols of vitality and divine favor. Royal apothecaries concocted potions and salves from ingredients like almond oil, beeswax, and crushed pearls to soften the skin or lighten blemishes. You might picture an attendant gently massaging a fragrant ointment into the queen's hands as she gazes into a polished bronze mirror. The use of cosmetics and perfumes was widespread, though always balanced against fears of vanity and moral decay. The act of shaving or hair removal was also ritualized, especially for queens. Smooth, pale skin was idealized, leading to the use of pumice stones, tweezers, and sometimes early forms of depilatory creams made from natural substances. Eyebrow shaping and the removal of unwanted facial hair signaled refinement and control over one's appearance. This grooming extended to teeth, with toothpicks and powders used to maintain cleanliness and fresh breath. You might smile at the image of a king, discreetly hiding a mint or clove between his teeth before an audience. Hygiene was deeply intertwined with religious and moral beliefs. Cleanliness was seen as a reflection of inner virtue, and many rituals incorporated prayer or blessing. For example, washing hands before meals or after certain activities was both a practical and symbolic act. Royal ceremonies often began with ritual purification, emphasizing the monarch's role as a sacred figure. The balance between bodily care and spiritual cleanliness adds complexity to these routines. One quirky tidbit involves the use of toilet water or scented waters created from distilling flowers, herbs, and spices. These were applied to the skin or clothing to mask odors and provide a refreshing sensation. Royal perfumers competed to create the most alluring blends, with fragrances like ambergris, musk, and jasmine coveted for their exotic appeal. Imagine the faint floral trail left by a queen as she moves through a corridor, a silent signature of her presence. Medical concerns also shaped hygiene practices. Skin conditions like eczema or scabies were common, and remedies often involved a mix of herbal treatments and superstition. Some salves contained ingredients as bizarre as crocodile dung or powdered gems, believed to have healing or protective properties. You probably won't want to test these, but they reflect the medieval blend of empirical and magical thinking. The use of clothing and linens also played a role in cleanliness. Royal garments were changed frequently, especially undergarments, to prevent disease and discomfort. Fine fabrics like linen absorbed sweat and were easier to wash, while wool and silk were prized for warmth and status. Bed linens were similarly cared for, with multiple layers and regular laundering when possible. The logistics of maintaining cleanliness in large, drafty castles were formidable. The privacy of these grooming rituals varied. While some tasks were performed in solitude, others required attendants, both male and female, who might be present for modesty, assistance, or supervision. The close physical proximity of servants and nobles created a social dynamic where intimacy and hierarchy coexisted. Imagine the quiet bustle of a royal dressing chamber as cloth is folded, oils applied, and hair braided with expert hands. Religious fasting and dietary restrictions also affected skin and hair, linking bodily appearance to spiritual discipline. For example, Lent might bring changes in diet that impacted complexion or energy levels, which in turn influenced grooming habits. The interconnectedness of body, spirit, and social expectation is a constant theme. Younger royals were often instructed in personal hygiene and grooming as part of their education, learning to navigate the delicate balance between appearance and propriety. These lessons were both practical and symbolic, preparing them for the responsibilities and scrutiny of court life. Despite all these rituals, medieval hygiene was imperfect by modern standards, and illnesses related to poor sanitation were common. However, the efforts to maintain cleanliness and beauty amidst these challenges reveal a sophisticated understanding of health and aesthetics. As your eyes grow heavy, imagine the soft glow of candlelight illuminating a perfumed chamber, the gentle touch of attendants preparing their sovereign for rest, and the comforting sense of herbs and flowers wrapping around you like a warm shawl. rituals of royal hygiene are a tender reminder of the timeless human desire for care, dignity, and comfort. Let these images soothe you, a lullaby of scents and sensations from a world where even kings and queens sought the simple grace of cleanliness before sleep. You now settle into the mysterious world of medieval royal fertility rituals, a realm where hope, fear, and ritual intertwined in complex patterns designed to ensure the survival of dynasties. In this shadowed space, where science and superstition met, kings and queens engaged in ceremonies and practices that might seem strange or even whimsical today, but which carried profound meaning for the health of their kingdoms and families. Imagine the hushed whispers in a royal chamber as preparations begin for a ritual meant to promote conception, a delicate dance of prayer, offerings, and symbolic acts. Fertility was a matter of state as much as personal desire, and the pressure on royal couples to produce heirs was immense. Failure to do so risked political instability, rival claims, and even civil war. Historians still argue whether some rituals were sincerely believed or performed more for public reassurance. One well-documented fact is that fertility was often linked to divine favor. Monarchs sought blessings from the church, visiting shrines, receiving relics, or participating in special masses to invoke the power of saints. Pilgrimages to holy sites reputed for fertility miracles were common, with queens sometimes undertaking these journeys in person or sending offerings. You can almost hear the murmur of prayers blending with the flicker of candlelight in a distant chapel. Alongside formal religious practices, folk traditions played a vibrant role. Royal households incorporated charms, amulets, and herbal remedies believed to boost fertility. These might include wearing certain stones, hanging protective symbols near the bed, or using ointments crafted from rare plants. Some of these customs derived from pre-Christian traditions, blending into the medieval Christian worldview in fascinating ways. A particularly quirky ritual involved the use of animal symbolism. For example, some believed that possessing a hare's foot or the feather of a rooster could encourage fertility, based on the animal's reputed virility. Royal apothecaries might prepare powders or potions containing these elements, adding an earthy, tactile dimension to abstract hopes. Imagine the careful mixing of such ingredients in a dimly lit chamber, the scents mingling in a heady blend. Timing was also crucial. Couples were advised to conceive during certain phases of the moon or specific days deemed auspicious. Medieval calendars often included fertility windows when conception was considered more likely or blessed. You might picture a queen consulting a lunar chart, the phases of the moon guiding intimate decisions. Some fertility rituals involved symbolic acts performed in public or semi-public ceremonies. For example, planting trees or flowers on royal grounds was seen as an earthly representation of growth and renewal. These acts connected the personal hopes of the monarchs with the natural cycles of the land, reinforcing their role as caretakers of both family and realm. themselves were steeped in ritual. The preparations for childbirth involved prayers, the presence of midwives and clerics, and often the use of protective symbols to guard mother and child. The moment of birth was both a joyous occasion and a precarious one, with celebrations tempered by the ever-present risk of complications. The birth chamber might be adorned with blessed objects, and the air thick with incense to purify and protect. One lesser-known practice involved fertility beds, specially prepared with fragrant herbs and fine linens, intended to create an environment conducive to conception and safe childbirth. These beds were sometimes passed down through generations, accumulating a kind of sacred history. Imagine a queen lying on such a bed, the textures and scents weaving a comforting spell. The royal midwife held a critical role in these rituals, serving not just as a medical professional, but as a keeper of tradition and secret knowledge. Her skills extended beyond physical care to include ritual actions, charms, and prayers. The trust placed in her was immense, reflecting the delicate balance of science and magic in medieval medicine. Medical texts of the time reflect an evolving understanding of fertility, combining classical knowledge with contemporary observations. Treatments ranged from dietary advice and exercise to more esoteric interventions. The blending of medical theory with spiritual and folk practices highlights the complex nature of medieval fertility care. Fertility issues were not without political consequences. A queen's failure to produce an heir could weaken her position, leading to pressure, intrigue, or even removal. Conversely, the birth of a healthy heir was a triumph that secured dynasties and inspired celebrations that could last days. These stakes infused every ritual with urgency. Despite all the rituals and hopes, fertility remained unpredictable. Many royal couples experienced miscarriages, stillbirths, or childlessness, underscoring the fragility of life in this era. Such tragedies were mourned deeply, but often met with renewed rituals and prayers, reflecting resilience and faith. As you drift toward sleep, picture the soft glow of candlelight flickering over embroidered bed curtains, the scent of herbs mingling with whispered prayers, and the gentle hands of a midwife offering comfort. The rhythms of fertility rituals blend hope, care, and tradition into a lullaby of continuity. Let these ancient practices wash over you like a gentle tide, a reminder of the timeless human longing for connection, life, and legacy. You now find yourself wandering through the peculiar realm of medieval royal aphrodisiacs and love potions, elixirs brewed from the strangest of ingredients, crafted to ignite passion, enhance desire, or sometimes simply impress a skeptical monarch. These potions were a blend of medieval medical theory, superstition, and pure imaginative alchemy, concocted in dimly lit chambers fragrant with herbs and mystery. Imagine the soft clinking of glass bottles, the aromatic swirl of crushed spices and petals, and the cautious sip that might awaken or confound the senses. Royal courts had an almost endless fascination with substances believed to boost sexual vigor. One well-known historical fact is that aphrodisiacs were often composed of rare and exotic ingredients, sometimes imported across great distances, adding to their allure and prestige. Spices like cinnamon, saffron, and cloves were prized not only for their flavor, but for their supposed ability to stoke the fires of desire. You might picture a queen's apothecary carefully grinding these spices into a delicate powder, the air thick with their warm, sweet scent. Some recipes were far more unusual. Ingredients like powdered unicorn horn, actually ground rhinoceros horn, crushed pearls, ambergris, a rare waxy substance from whales, and even human bodily fluids entered the mix. The more exotic and bizarre, the better, since these ingredients were thought to carry potent mystical or medicinal properties. You probably won't want to try these at home, but their inclusion underscores the era's blending of the natural and supernatural. Historians still debate the extent to which these potions actually affected the body, or whether their power was mostly psychological, a placebo effect amplified by the ritual of consumption, and the faith placed in their magic. Whether true or not, the belief in their efficacy shaped courtly behavior and expectations, making the potions themselves a kind of theatrical performance in desire. Aphrodisiacs also had social functions. Presenting a love potion to a monarch or noble was a way for apothecaries and courtiers to demonstrate loyalty and skill, while for the recipient, it was a way to display openness to passion or influence. Imagine a king receiving a small vial from a trusted advisor, the exchange laced with layers of meaning beyond the liquid inside. The preparation of these potions was often surrounded by elaborate rituals. Herbs might be gathered at specific times, such as during certain moon phases or on saints' feast days, to imbue the potion with extra potency. The mixing and bottling might be accompanied by prayers, chants, or symbolic gestures, blending science with spirituality. This careful choreography lent the process a solemnity and magic all its own. The use of animal parts in these concoctions reflected the medieval belief in sympathetic magic, that consuming parts of a vigorous creature could transfer its qualities to the human body. For instance, deer antlers, believed to symbolize virility, or fish roe, associated with fertility, found their way into some recipes. You can almost imagine the medieval apothecary shelves crowded with jars of powdered horns, bones, and dried organs, each waiting for their moment in the crucible. Some love potions also served medicinal purposes beyond sexuality, aiming to restore general health or treat conditions believed to impede desire, such as melancholy or fatigue. The overlap between physical health and sexual function was well recognized, making aphrodisiacs a kind of holistic treatment in the eyes of medieval healers. Royal women's use of these potions was often more discreet, but no less significant. Queens and noblewomen sought remedies to to enhance their allure or maintain their partner's interest, using potions, perfumes, and salves designed to kindle attraction. The sharing or gifting of such remedies could be a subtle form of communication between lovers, a way to negotiate desire within the strictures of court life. The risk of poisoning or adverse reactions added a dangerous edge to these practices. Not every potion was safe, and the boundary between love magic and harm could be perilously thin. There are tales, some more legend than fact, of rivals slipping deadly concoctions disguised as aphrodisiacs into unsuspecting courtiers' cups. Historians still wonder how much danger lurked behind the allure of these mysterious bottles. Beyond individual use, aphrodisiacs sometimes featured in courtly entertainment. Banquets might include dishes or drinks rumored to have love-enhancing properties, turning dining into a sensory game of seduction and spectacle. The mingling scents, tastes, and textures became part of the night's enchantment. The fascination with love potions persisted well beyond the medieval era, but their origins and uses during royal times remind us how human desire and the search for connection have long inspired creativity and mystery. These potions are more than curiosities. They are reflections of the hopes, fears, and fantasies that have shaped intimate relationships throughout history. As you feel your breath slow and your body soften, picture the flickering shadows in a chamber filled with the scent of crushed herbs and sweet spices. The delicate clink of glass, the whispered incantation, and the hopeful sip, all weaving together into a lullaby of longing and enchantment. Let this world of mysterious elixirs and ancient magic cradle you gently, guiding you toward a restful, dream-filled sleep. You now glide into the shadowy world of medieval royal sexual taboos and forbidden desires, where strict rules governed behavior, but human nature often whispered otherwise. The interplay between what was allowed, what was condemned, and what was quietly tolerated created a rich tapestry of contradictions and curiosities, all under the watchful eyes of crown and church. Imagine the hushed conversations behind closed doors, the stolen moments, and the secret longings that defied official decrees. One widely accepted historical fact is that medieval courts enforced a strict moral code, heavily influenced by church doctrine, which condemned a range of sexual behaviors as sinful or criminal. Adultery, incest, bestiality, and sodomy were among the acts harshly punished, sometimes by exile, imprisonment, or worse. Yet, enforcement varied greatly depending on rank, gender, and political convenience, revealing a complex social dynamic. A particularly curious taboo was the prohibition against marrying or engaging sexually with close relatives. Royal bloodlines, however, often faced a tricky dilemma. To preserve dynastic purity, intermarriage between cousins or more distant relatives was common. This contradiction led to tension between official doctrine and political necessity. Imagine a king and queen exchanging vows, both aware of the delicate balancing act between love, duty, and church rules. Historians still argue about the extent to which certain forbidden desires were practiced in secret within royal courts. Rumors and accusations often swirled, some true, some exaggerated or weaponized for political gain. The line between genuine taboo and courtly intrigue blurred, turning sexuality into a tool of power and scandal. One fringe but fascinating topic involves the so-called secret loves, or discreet relationships that royals maintained outside official marriage. Mistresses were common, but some relationships defied conventional boundaries or crossed lines considered taboo. These affairs required discretion and skill, with courtiers often playing the roles of facilitators or protectors, another taboo related to public expressions of sexuality. While private intimacy was expected and even celebrated within marriage, overt displays of passion, especially by women, were frowned upon. Female chastity and modesty were idealized, creating a tension between personal desire and social expectation. You might imagine a queen navigating this delicate balance, her private yearnings concealed beneath layers of silk and ceremony. The church's role in defining and policing sexual behavior was immense. Confession, penance, and moral instruction aimed to regulate desire, often emphasizing control and restraint. Yet, even clergy struggled with temptation, and tales of clerical scandal reveal the human frailty behind the robes. This hypocrisy added layers of complexity to the enforcement of taboos. Royal funerary practices also intersected with sexuality and taboo. For example, some believed that the unfulfilled desires of the dead could haunt the living, leading to rituals designed to protect the realm and family line. The blending of sexuality, death, and superstition created a potent cultural undercurrent. A quirky tidbit involves the use of symbolic objects to ward off taboo or sin. Items like garlic, crosses, or charms might be placed near beds or in royal chambers to protect against evil influences or illicit desires. These practices show how medieval people sought to control the uncontrollable through magic and ritual. The tension between natural human impulses and societal rules produced fascinating contradictions. For instance, certain acts condemned in public could be tacitly accepted or even encouraged in private for political or dynastic reasons. This duality reveals the complexities of medieval sexuality beyond simple moral judgments. Medicinal texts of the time sometimes treated forbidden desires as illnesses or moral failings, prescribing remedies ranging from herbal treatments to spiritual exercises. The intertwining of health, morality, and sexuality highlights the era's holistic approach to human behavior. Younger royals were often educated in these taboos, learning early about the dangers and expectations surrounding sexuality. These lessons were part practical guidance, part moral instruction, shaping behavior and reinforcing social hierarchies. despite strict rules, desire and pleasure found ways to persist and adapt. Poetry, music, and art offered coded expressions of taboo themes, allowing exploration within acceptable boundaries. This creative subversion enriched medieval court culture, making it vibrant and complex. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine the quiet hush of a royal chamber where secrets dwell, the delicate tension between restraint and longing hanging in the air like a soft veil. The contradictions of desire and duty swirl gently, inviting you to rest within their timeless dance. Let these whispered complexities soothe you, a gentle invitation to embrace the humanity beneath history's grand facades. You find yourself now immersed in the quiet but rich world of medieval royal courtship and matchmaking, where love was often less about butterflies in the stomach and more about political chessboards, dynastic strategy, and carefully choreographed social rituals. Yet, behind these seemingly cold arrangements, moments of tenderness, longing, and awkward flirtation blossomed, small human touches that speak across the centuries to the heart beneath the crown. Imagine the cool stone halls of a castle, echoing with the footsteps of nobles gathering to witness the first meeting of a future royal couple. The air is thick with anticipation and careful etiquette, the scent of wax candles mingling with the faint trace of lavender from a lady's gown. While marriage was primarily a tool to secure alliances, the participants were still people, often thrust into new and unfamiliar roles, learning the delicate art of courtship under intense scrutiny. A well-documented historical fact is that royal marriages were typically arranged from infancy or early childhood, with contracts negotiated by parents and advisors rather than by the couple themselves. These negotiations involved considerations of territory, wealth, and political advantage, sometimes spanning continents and languages. The actual meeting of bride and groom could occur years after the formal betrothal, adding layers of distance and uncertainty. Despite this, there was room for romance and playfulness within these frameworks. Letters exchanged between royal lovers reveal moments of humor, longing, and personal expression, suggesting that affection could and did grow. Imagine a queen writing by candlelight, her script flowing with subtle jokes or gentle complaints about the difficulties of court life. Historians still debate how often these letters reflected genuine emotion versus political performance. Gifts were an essential part of courtship, functioning both as tokens of affection and as symbols of status and intent. Jewel-encrusted rings, embroidered handkerchiefs, and rare perfumes were common presents, often accompanied by poetry or riddles. Picture a prince presenting a delicate necklace to a princess during a grand banquet, the crowd watching as much for the spectacle as for the private meaning behind the gift. Courtly love, a cultural ideal that emphasized chivalry, devotion, and often unconsummated desire, shaped many interactions. Originating in the troubadour tradition, courtly love celebrated the spiritual and emotional aspects of attraction, sometimes elevating love to to a near-religious experience. This ideal influenced royal behavior, even as political marriages demanded pragmatism. The tension between idealized love and duty is a recurring theme. The role of intermediaries, ladies-in-waiting, confidants, and diplomats was vital in navigating courtship. They delivered messages, arranged secret meetings, and offered counsel, acting as both facilitators and protectors of reputation. Imagine a discreet note passed under a tablecloth during a royal feast, the words inside charged with meaning, yet carefully coded. Physical expressions of affection were often subtle and governed by strict etiquette. Touches were fleeting, glances carefully controlled, and public displays of intimacy rare and regulated. Yet, these small gestures carried significant weight, capable of signaling favor, alliance, or desire. The dance of courtship was as much about reading silence as spoken words. Religious considerations permeated courtship rituals. The Church's emphasis on chastity, sanctity of marriage, and moral behavior shaped expectations and practices. Confession and prayer were integral parts of preparing for marriage, and couples were often counseled to cultivate virtue alongside affection. This spiritual dimension added gravity to romantic endeavors. Royal matchmaking sometimes faced challenges beyond politics, such as differences in culture, language, or personality. Stories of mismatched couples, reluctant spouses, or unexpected friendships abound, revealing the human unpredictability beneath royal protocols. Some marriages blossomed into genuine partnerships, while others remained distant or even hostile. Fertility expectations added pressure to courtship and marriage, with royal couples aware that producing heirs was a paramount duty. This awareness shaped interactions and often cast a shadow over personal relationships. The anticipation, hope, and sometimes fear surrounding conception influenced behavior and rituals. Art and literature from the period reflect and shape notions of courtship. Paintings depicted romantic ideals, while poems and songs explored themes of love, longing, and social constraint. These cultural products provided both instruction and escape, allowing royals and courtiers to engage with love in imaginative ways. As your mind relaxes, picture the gentle rustle of silk gowns, the soft murmur of whispered words, and the hesitant, hopeful glances exchanged in candlelit chambers. The dance of courtship unfolds slowly, a delicate balance of duty and desire, tradition and personal longing. Let these images cradle you gently, a soothing reminder that love, complex, constrained, and beautiful, has always been a part of the human story. You now wander through the labyrinth of medieval royal, erotic art, and symbolism, a world where images, objects, and gestures whispered forbidden stories beneath layers of decorum and ceremony. In an age when overt discussion of sexuality was constrained by religious and social strictures, art became a secret language, a subtle rebellion, and a means of expressing desire, power, and identity. Imagine the soft candlelight glinting off intricate tapestries, or the carved details on a palace wall, each holding a story meant only for the initiated. One undeniable historical fact is that erotic imagery was far more present in medieval royal contexts than many might assume. Manuscripts, paintings, and sculptures sometimes featured sensual motifs woven into religious scenes, courtly romances, or allegories. These works balanced piety with playful suggestion, navigating a thin line between reverence and sensuality. Historians still debate how openly these images were meant to be viewed, and by whom. Take, for example, the famous marginalia in illuminated manuscripts, those quirky little illustrations tucked into the borders of holy texts. Some depict playful, even body scenes, animals in suggestive poses, mischievous figures engaging in comic sexual antics, or exaggerated depictions of courtly lovers. These images might have served as humorous relief for scribes or subtle commentaries on human nature. Picture a monk quietly sketching a grinning fox, engaged in less than pious behavior while copying a psalm. Royal chambers and private spaces also featured erotic symbolism encoded in tapestries and furnishings. Flowers like the lily or rose often carried layered meanings of purity and passion, while mythical creatures such as the griffin or unicorn could symbolize both chastity and desire. The placement and combination of these symbols created narratives that only the learned or intimate could decode. Imagine a queen tracing the folds of a tapestry that speaks volumes without uttering a word. Jewelry and personal adornments played a similar role. Rings, brooches, or pendants sometimes incorporated symbols associated with love, fertility, or protection against evil. The secret language of gemstones and motifs allowed royals to convey messages of affection or alliance discreetly. You might envision a king slipping a ring adorned with a heart or intertwined vines onto his queen's finger as a silent pledge. The use of coded gestures in courtly etiquette added yet another layer of meaning. A certain touch on the arm, a particular way of handing a letter, or the angle of a curtsy could express attraction or preference without risking scandal. Courtiers became adept at reading these signs, which could alter relationships and influence political alliances. Imagine the subtle glances and movements in a ballroom dance, holding more significance than the music itself. Religious art sometimes incorporated erotic symbolism, reflecting the complex attitudes of the period. The Virgin Mary, for example, was often depicted with attributes that combined purity and fertility, embodying a paradox that fascinated theologians and artists alike. These images served both devotional and didactic purposes, reminding viewers of the sacredness of procreation within marriage. The interplay of spiritual and sensual themes is a hallmark of medieval artistic expression. A particularly curious example is the Sheelanigig, a carved figure of a woman displaying exaggerated genitalia, found in castles and churches. Scholars still argue about its meaning. Some see it as a protective symbol warding off evil, others as a warning against lust. The ambiguity of such figures adds mystery and intrigue to royal sites, hinting at the coexistence of fear and fascination surrounding sexuality. Music and poetry also carried erotic symbolism, often cloaked in allegory and metaphor. Troubadours and court poets crafted verses celebrating love, desire, and beauty, sometimes with layers of double meaning. These works were performed in intimate settings, allowing for private enjoyment and subtle flirtation. Imagine the gentle strumming of a lute underscoring words that could both charm and scandalize. The transmission of erotic art and symbolism was influenced by cross-cultural exchange, especially through royal marriages that connected different traditions and styles. Islamic, Byzantine, and classical motifs blended with European ones, enriching the visual vocabulary of desire. This blending created a dynamic and evolving language of eroticism within royal courts. Despite the constraints of censorship and morality, the persistence of erotic imagery reveals a human need to explore and express sexuality artistically. These symbols provided a safe space to acknowledge desire while respecting social boundaries. The tension between concealment and revelation is part of what makes medieval royal erotic art so compelling. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine the soft textures of tapestry, the shimmer of gold thread, and the whispered stories woven into stone and fabric. The secret language of desire speaks softly across the centuries, inviting you to listen with a quiet heart. Let these images linger like a fading melody, a gentle reminder that even in restraint, the human spirit finds ways to celebrate love and passion. You drift now into the quiet twilight of medieval royal sexuality, where the burdens of duty meet the delicate joys of intimacy, and where the whispered echoes of centuries past invite reflection on the human heart. As the grand tapestries of history begin to fold, the stories you've traveled through gently settle into a calm, soothing hum, much like the soft murmur of a distant stream beneath moonlit trees. The complexities of desire, power, and ritual dissolve into the night, leaving only the tender threads that bind us all across time. By now, you've glimpsed the secret corridors and hidden chambers where kings and queens navigated love and longing under the ever-watchful gaze of crown and church. You felt the tension between public image and private desire, the mixture of superstition and science, and the dance of power played out in gestures both grand and intimate. Yet, beyond the pomp and politics, there was always the quiet humanity, the hopes, fears, and simple need for connection that transcended centuries. The rituals of courtly love, the coded glances, and the strange remedies remind us that sexuality is never just about the physical. It is entwined with identity, survival, and expression. You might imagine a weary monarch, exhausted by the demands of rule, finding solace in a trusted partner's embrace. or a queen lighting a candle in a chapel, whispering prayers for favor not just in kingdom, but in heart. As you settle deeper into this gentle reverie, the images soften and fade, the scent of rosewater, the flicker of candlelight, the distant melody of a lute, now a faint lullaby. The strange and wonderful customs, the scandals and secrets, fold away like the closing petals of a night-blooming flower, leaving a serene darkness that invites rest. Remember that behind every crown lies a story shaped by the timeless human journey, filled with tenderness, complexity, and the search for belonging. These medieval tales of royal sexuality offer more than curiosity. They offer connection, a bridge from past to present, reminding you that the heart's mysteries remain, in all their forms, forever familiar. Now, as the quiet night embraces you, let your breathing slow, your mind soften, and your spirit drift on gentle currents toward peaceful sleep. May these stories, whispered softly in the dark, bring you comfort and calm, a tender companion for your dreams. Good night,